All right, you guys, we're a couple minutes over the hour, so why don't we go ahead and get started? I'll pull up a PowerPoint presentation, but today's really just kind of a recap. We had done a webinar a couple months ago with Redtail, and there was just a lot of feedback and a lot of questions. And I thought, why not, just create like an open forum and a space for us all to connect today where you guys can come ask questions and discuss, hot topics that are top of mind for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just jump into it. So again, this is very much intended to be a conversation. I'll give you a brief little intro, on myself and Graham, and then we'll get after it. So my name is Kate Guillen. I am the founder and lead coach here at Simplicity Operations Management. And we are a consulting company that specializes in the implementation of operational systems utilizing, your firm's CRM. Graham is our implementation specialist on our team. He also comes from an administrative and operations background. He helps, implement the strategies that we discuss with the firms that we work with to help standardize and create efficiencies utilizing, Redtail CRM. And so Graham's going to kind of man the question and answer box today and be our MC. So like I said, this is very much intended to be a conversation, open forum, to kind of kickstart the conversation. I would love to hear from everybody. What are some of the issues affecting your firm? We hear a lot, our efficiency is low. We really want to be a well-oiled machine, but we don't really know how to use our CRM. I would love to hear from you guys as CRM users. What are some of the pain points that affect you guys? And you can just drop your, questions, comments, concerns into the Q&A or the chat box, and Graham's going to kind of man those today.
Yes, I'm going to do my best to, as we go through, if we don't get a lot of questions, or if we get too many questions, I'm going to try and find a good way to, work them into our discussions. And I'll try and interrupt Kate if, she's, on a roll and there's other questions that need to be asked. So just throw your questions into the chat, and I'll do my best to keep track of it. One of the things that says they're affecting their RIA is no systems and processes. We're trying to grow, but don't have the systems in place.
We get that a lot. And so, like Graham said, we'll just kind of go through naturally these questions. At the end, I'll include Courtney from our team's contact info. If there's something that got missed or something that you want to follow up on, you guys can email questions to Courtney, and we'll get back to you. Or, if there's enough questions about the same topic, we can do another webinar series next month. So one of the questions we get a lot is, we just don't really know where to start. We have no processes. Can you help us? And so our proposed solution, we call it our RIA operating system. Essentially, it's a series of systems to manage everything from contacts, tasks, our calendar, our sales pipeline, and our client accounts. We call them our 5 core competencies. I listed them there on the left. But that's really, and that's kind of the sequential order that we get started in: organizing contacts, cleaning up contacts, standardizing the way we communicate over Redtail, and manage our client task load. Once we kind of get that dialed in, then we look at, the services that we offer, who we offer them to, and build out a proactive client review process within our CRM. And then, as I'm sure you guys are aware of, you've heard me talk on the last webinar, we're really big fans of using workflows to standardize our operating procedures, and using Redtail as a place to store and launch those processes, so that we have a standard way of serving our clients, so that we have a standard way of operating internally. And so we're not having to reinvent the wheel every single time we go to do something. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. On that point, somebody asked kind of a question about workflows is, we have some workflows built out, but we're trying to use them as well as tasks.
Sure.
And sometimes it feels like, just work is being duplicated for no reason. Can you talk about how tasks and workflows kind of go together?
Absolutely. And this is a question that comes up a lot and is an important one. So the way we use tasks and workflows in combination with one another, essentially, a task is a call to action. A task is something that needs to be done. Let's just use a beneficiary change as an example. You come out of a client review meeting and a Benny needs to be updated. You're going to put in a task to update the Benny. That's the call to action. How you execute that request is a workflow. The sequential order of processes that go into updating a beneficiary is the workflow. Think of it this way. We use tasks, especially activity templates. And I'm going to actually go into the database here in a second, Graham, and I'm going to just show this as an example. If it's just a task, if it's something that's can be done in a day, if it doesn't follow any sort of chronological timeline, that's a really good standalone activity template. If the activity or the task or the request does follow a chronological timeline and something needs to be done first, second, third, and fourth, 3 days before, day of, 7 days after, that's a really good workflow. So I'm going to show you really quick in the database just how I manage that as an example. So let's say, let me grab a contact here. I'm going to use my Maggie investor contact. And I just had a review meeting with Maggie. So I'm going to put it in my notes about my review meeting and my action items. And I've got a couple of bullets. One of them is a Benny change. One of them is she needs some money. One of them is, she needs to open up a 529, whatever the situation might be. I'm going to put in my notes. We know that's a regulatory requirement to save all client correspondence. And now I'm going to build a couple of activities based on this correspondence. So I'm going to go to my actions here. And I'm going to create a follow-up activity. And this is where I'm a really big fan of utilizing activity templates. And so I've just got one here I'm going to use as my example. One of the action items as a result of this conversation was a Benny change. So it pre-fills the Benny change subject in there. I open this guy up. I'm able to add specifics, based on the conversation that I had with the client, who the new Benny is. I can task it off to whoever on my team is going to be responsible for executing that request. It's linked to Maggie's contact record, so I can build out a historical timeline of all the action items and all of the meetings that we have for Maggie. The link note is logged here, so I can see all the correspondence that I've had with the client as it relates to this activity. And wouldn't you know, because I used that activity template, I have created an activity category that is linked to an automation. So this is, I'm kind of getting deep into the weeds here, but follow my logic on this. In order to create an efficient process for managing both activities and workflows, we use activity categories as the source for launching workflows that pertain to specific activities. So that when you add the Benny change activity, and I'm gonna save it here, it's automatically going to launch the Benny change workflow. I didn't have to do anything other than put in the activity that my team member needs to change a Benny, give it the category of Benny change, and then it automatically launches the Benny change workflow that you can see down here that takes my team through, preparing the paperwork, sending it out, making sure we get it back, saving it to the client file, submitting it to the custodian, like the how to execute that Benny change request.
One of the things that someone, Scott Sullivan, is asking is, why would you create a task instead of just launching the workflow directly? Why would you launch the task to then launch the workflow?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so I could kind of go both ways on it. I just find tasks, live here on your today page and is essentially you working as like your to-do list or your action items. And so we base everything off of tasks to create kind of the starting or the launching off point for a workflow so that we can manage it from our today page. so that we can see it here under our client's contact record. I've just found that workflows are a little bit too buried in the system, and they don't have a great way of logging client correspondence. One of the things I really like about activities, especially for an activity that kind of evolves, or there's multiple touch points or client communication as it relates to this request, is that it can all be logged here under, let me see if this guy will open for me. It can all be logged as a linked note. And so I'm a really big fan of these linked notes linked to the activity. Come on, Redtail, don't fail me here. Linked to the activity so that if you have additional communication, you can save it as another linked note, and you can build upon this activity and see here in chronological order all of the conversations that you've had with the client as it relates to this request. Workflow doesn't quite do that as cleanly.
And can you talk about what workflows you would recommend?
Oh, absolutely. I actually, let me see here. I put together a list. You can find these also on our website. It's like a free download. Let me pull it up here. So again, in our opinion, a workflow, anything that is repeatable is workflowable. And so here's kind of like a standard set of workflows that we would suggest everybody, excuse me, incorporate into their practice. One very repeatable process is your onboarding process. From the time you need to meet a new prospect to the time they sign on the dotted line and become a full-fledged client, I would highly recommend that you standardize this process and create individual workflows for each different type of meeting that you have to allow flexibility in this process. Additionally, there's other, client service related type requests that are very repeatable. And here are some examples, death, divorce, contributions, distributions, new accounts. Again, thinking through your standard operating procedures and documenting them in a workflow format housed within Redtail that we think should be the hub of your practice. And kind of taking it to like the next level, outside of just client responsibilities, there are other operational responsibilities within a registered investment advisory practice that are also very repeatable. And here's some other examples of practice management type responsibilities. Acknowledging client birthdays, having seminars, having client educational or appreciation events, compliance requirements. You can kind of see here my list, but yeah. All of these resources are available to you on our website. But that's a really good question and a couple of examples for you guys.
Someone else is asking, do you have to launch workflows manually each time?
No. So like the example that I just gave you, let me show you. I think I actually have another document here, activity template recommendations. So we use, like I just showed you with that Benny change example. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. Like that Benny change example, we use activity templates with preset activity categories that automatically launch the corresponding workflow. So when I put in an activity utilizing the template for an account transfer, it automatically launches the account transfer workflow, which tells my team how our firm handles an account transfer, and that step 1 goes to Bob on my team, step 2 goes to me, step 3 goes to Graham, and easily passes hands, in a very repeatable, scalable manner.
Got it.
This is also a resource on our website. You guys are welcome to download and see our examples of activity templates that correspond with the workflows and the automation that we use to trigger the workflows from the template.
Tracy wants to know, do you complete the task within the workflow and then complete the activity when the entire workflow is complete?
Exactly. Yeah. And I get, it's a little redundant, but until we have a better solution in Redtail for managing client correspondence within a workflow, I find that to be the most efficient way of doing it. So the activity gets kicked off, it launches the workflow, you do your piece in the workflow, you complete the steps in the workflow, and you just kick the can kind of down the road with that activity, and you complete it upon completion. but you keep it open for logging client correspondence and any sort of, internal dialogue all gets logged within the activity. And then, it gets saved to the client's notes section, and you can filter it by activity, and you'll very easily be able to pull up completed activities. Great question.
Got it. So the automation is the workflow. The automation is what launches the workflow. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so back to that document that I was just showing you, the activity template is called Move Money. And so when I go to add an activity, I select the Move Money template, and we've preset the category of the activity template to trigger the automation. So the automations are kind of like a little bit of a puzzle piece. I can show you one as an example, but essentially she's spot on. The activity category is a triggering event within Redtail. And so I'll show you the example here under your template section under automations. This Benny change, for example. So the name of the automation is going to be consistent with the name of the workflow, is going to be consistent with the name of the activity template. And the triggering event is an activity is added. When an activity is added, we are going to automatically launch the Benny change workflow if the activity category is Benny change. Let me do that one more time because it's kind of like a little bit of a brain teaser and a jigsaw puzzle, but essentially we're going to call the automation the same thing, something obvious, the same thing that's the name of the activity template, and the same thing that's the name as the workflow. And the triggering event is going to be you add the activity, which launches the workflow only if the activity category is Benny change. So whether I add the activity from a template that pre-fills the category, or I add an activity called Benny change and I give it the category of Benny change, it's automatically going to launch that workflow. But we're in the business of working smarter and not harder. And so to save ourselves, clicks and essentially minutes and hours over the course of the week, we are big fans of utilizing activity templates like that list that I just showed you, pre-filling the category to ensure that the workflow is automatically launched and my team is prompted with our steps for executing whatever the request might be.
Tracy also wants to know that for workflow tasks that involve other team members, do you assign it to them via the workflow or via an activity?
Via the workflow. So I'm sure you guys have seen in the workflow, you have the ability of assigning specific tasks to individuals on your team. And so within the template, we specify who's doing what. So when the Benny change workflow gets launched, I know that step one is going to my team member that's responsible for that. After he completes his step, it comes to me to do my piece. When I complete it, it goes to the next person, so on and so forth.
Awesome. Moving to different subjects, talking about contacts.
Sure.
Our someone's saying our contacts are all over the place, and how do we organize that into a neat, streamlined system?
Another hot topic, and we get asked this a lot. Where do I even get started? And so, I'm sure you guys have all heard Redtail say, good data is clean data. You can't possibly run accurate reports if your database is a disaster. And so I don't know, probably some of you are familiar with, but I'll show you an example of our Redtail style guide that is, let me pull it up for you here. Okay, so this is a Redtail document that is downloadable from the help desk. We also have our own version on our website with our recommendations, but essentially you need to look at the contacts in your database and devise a hierarchy, if you will, and think about who are these people in your database? What reports are you going to want to run based off of this information to give you a good indication of how to group them together? And so I put together a standard set of statuses and categories that I'll share with you now. But essentially, Redtail will tell you, in an effort to reduce redundancy or confusion amongst your team, you should limit your status amount to 12 statuses. And I'd have to agree with them. And the reason I say that is when you have too many statuses, you run the risk of a contact possibly being two. So the way Graham's brain works and the way my brain works is different. He assigns them one way, I assign him the other way, and now our reporting is inaccurate. And so as much as you can limit the amount of statuses that you have, the better off you're going to be. And so I put in some definitions here. The status is the highest level to organize a contact in your database, and then a category then allows you to further categorize a contact within their status. So in my experience, these are the most commonly used statuses. With most important there being your client, who's a revenue generating relationship. And then we break them down into categories. If I make this smaller, can you guys see it a little bit better? Can you see it okay?
I can see it, yes.
But essentially the category shows what type of contact they are within their status. So again, thinking of it in like a kind of a hierarchy, with status being at the highest level, your category being the next highest level. And I've given you guys some good examples here of how we standardize that. And then when we work with firms, we create a big export essentially of all of your contacts within your CRM, and we just go through it bite-sized chunk by bite-sized chunk, and we collaborate on what the statuses and categories should be, and then we assign them to each one of the contacts. And then my team takes it back to your database and actually does the cleanup and eliminates any unnecessary statuses and categories and gets it really well organized so that we can develop quick lists like you all are familiar with in Redtail, which is Redtail lingo for a frequently accessed report. We can create custom exports to be able to find the information that you're looking for and run accurate reports.
Someone else wants to know if the style guide's on our website.
Style guide is on our website. It is another one of our free downloads. But if I were to give you any recommendation to get started, the first thing I would do is review your contacts, make sure you have no more than 12 statuses, identify what the category should be, and start to organize all of your contacts there. Without clean, good data within your CRM, your life is infinitely more difficult.
Kimberly stated that they only have two statuses. They have active and inactive, and then they expanded categories after that.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
The only reason I don't like it is again, I come from an administrative or an operations background, and I'm asked often, can you get me a list of just my clients? Can you get me a list of just the children of clients? And by having just active or inactive, there are additional clicks when running a report, as silly as that sounds. But it's easier to access that information if these main contact types are at surface level. She can essentially, accomplish the same thing. It's just equates to more clicks in a day. But that's my personal opinion.
Scott wants to know, how do these statuses relate to households and family? Can you have two clients in the same household, like a husband and wife both be clients?
Yeah.
And be in the same family? That
is a great question. And I go around in circles with a client, spouse of a client, child of a client. And here's what I've come up with that works. So again, I come from an administrative background. I've done a lot of compliance audits. And when compliance says, I need a list of all of your clients, they don't care that they're the spouse of a client. They just care that you manage an account for them, that they're a revenue generating relationship. So even though there might be a lead client and then a kind of a backseat spouse, the fact that they're both technically, co-trustees on a trust account or co-owners on a joint account, or you manage as much as a dime on that spouse's behalf, they need to be labeled as a client. Spouse of a client is reserved for record-keeping purposes only. These are spouses of your clients that you do not manage any money for, you do not have an account for, they've never signed an engagement agreement with you, but you want to indicate in your database that your client's married and you know what their spouse's name and their information. To build out like a family tree and show how people are associated at like the household level, we can do that under memberships. I won't spend too much time on that today, but I'll show you under Maggie's contact here. If I go to more and I go to memberships, I can add here. I can add here that Helen is her aunt. Okay, I can add here that Helen is her mother-in-law and she is the daughter-in-law. I can add, I can build out the entire family tree here under memberships and show those specific relationships, but I do not do that at the status level. I've gotten to databases and I've seen statuses like grandchild, aunt, uncle, cousin, ex-wife, and you really muddy up the database doing it that way. It's not intended to be used. The membership field is where you're intended to be used for building out a family tree. Did that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. It looks like I am all caught up on questions. So,
let me piggyback on Scott's question for 1 second. So,
yeah.
Scott, yes, both spouses should be labeled as clients. And let me just use this Maggie investor as an example. She and her husband are both going to be labeled as clients, and under the family, you can indicate who's the head of household. So who do you have the primary relationship with? If you wanted to, if compliance says, hey, give me a list of all your clients, that would be both she and her husband. But if you want to get me a list of households, you can run a contact report based on head of household. So it should slim your numbers down by almost half for your married folks.
Can you go back to workflows and walk us through an example of one?
An example of a workflow? Sure.
Yes.
Let me go back to, so as a reminder, I added a Benny change activity. I had a meeting with Maggie investor, and as a result of that conversation, she needs to update a Benny. It automatically launched my Benny change workflow. I can see my workflows here in the top corner or down here at the bottom. And when I click on the workflow, it's going to take me through the step-by-step process for making sure that I've captured all of the information. Essentially, a workflow is a set of steps and tasks, which is your firm's standard operating procedure for managing whatever that request is. So I captured all the information. I need to make sure, as a reminder, to put in my notes regarding the Benny change. I need to create the Benny change paperwork and send it for signature. The beautiful thing about workflows is not only can I see this in a nice checklist format here, but if I hover or open this up, I have reminders here. So some of you guys that are veterans and have done this a lot, you probably don't need all these details, but where I have found this extremely helpful is when you have somebody new on your team or role shift or somebody's out and you need to pick up where somebody else left off. It is sure helpful to be able to see here the email that you send to the client with the Benny change information, the required paperwork, where documents live in the server so you have easy access to documents. The other beautiful thing about these workflows are you can see these due dates. And so I launched the workflow today. And so the target date is today. And now my follow-up steps are going to follow today's date. So a week, I sent the paperwork out, and a week from today, I'm going to confirm the paperwork is signed and returned. I'm really big on ensuring that things don't slip through the crack. And so the best way to do that is to follow a checklist and have something that pops back up a week later to make sure that, you sent the paperwork out and you make sure you double check that you get it back. And so it comes to a fork in the road here where it says, did you get it back or did you not? If you did not, it's going to prompt me to send a follow-up email to Maggie saying, hey, want to make sure you got my previous email. Here again is a link to the paperwork. If the paperwork is signed and returned, you have your reminder to save it to the server, make sure that it gets submitted to the custodian. Once it's been submitted to the custodian, a couple of days later, 3 days later, it's going to double check and make sure that the custodian has done, what you've asked them to do. And then my favorite step in the workflow is emailing the client the confirmation. And it's funny, I get this question a lot where teams say, well, gosh, if I move money, I could just do it on the spot. And I don't need to launch a workflow to tell me how to do a move money. And you're probably right. If the cash is available and you got the client on the phone, you're communicating about setting expectations for when they should expect the money, maybe you don't need to launch a workflow. But in my experience, I would launch workflows even for a move money request so that it would prompt me the next day or a couple days later to close the loop with the client. There's nothing that I hate worse than being beat to the punch. Client asks me to change a Benny. She signs paperwork. She sends it back and nobody ever gets back to her. The client, comes back a week, 2 weeks later and says, hey guys, sent you paperwork. Did my accounts ever get updated? I hate being beat to the punch on things like that. And so I write into every workflow as the final task to email the client a confirmation. And so here I can literally copy and paste this out of my workflow into my email and let the client know that I've in fact updated the bennies on her couple of accounts, wish her a good week, complete the task. And now the workflow is clean, tidy, done. And I have a step-by-step here or a checklist here of everything I've executed.
Joan wants to know, do you update the activity that goes along with the workflow to match the dates of the workflow?
Not really. No, I trust that the workflow is going to follow the timeline that we've set. And so for inviting someone, to a meeting, the workflow follows up a week later to make sure that they book the meeting. If I send out paperwork, the workflow comes back a week later to make sure that I get paperwork back. Pretty much all of our workflows we've set, week reminders or 3-day reminders so that things don't slip through the cracks. And I kick the activity down the road a week, sometimes 2. And if I hear back from the client before that activity comes up, I can get in there and I can add additional documentation and amend it. But no, I basically trust the workflow as, my timeline. And I'll show you one thing here really quick of why I like activities over workflows for managing your to-do list is so one of the recommendations we always make to the firms that we work with is having, 4 main tabs open up in Redtail every morning when you log in. These are the 4 most frequently accessed pages within Redtail. And we've just done a lot of training with Redtail users, and I see people fumble around with this really badly where they're putting in a note, someone calls in, wants to book an appointment, you need to pull up the calendar, but you don't want to close out the note because you're neck deep in writing this paragraph, and people are just fumbling around with these tabs. And so our solution is to open up your calendar so you have an overview of what's going on firm-wide. Your today page, which acts as your to-do list, I access here from my today page. Your workflow page, you can see here from your today page, there is a section for workflow tasks, but unless that task is actually due today, it's not going to show up on your workflow page. So you're kind of blind to them, and they're a little bit buried in the database, which is something that I don't love about this system. So we open up our workflow page, our personal workflow page. So under the Today tab here, up here in the right-hand corner is where I'm going to see a list of all of my workflows. And so this is just a demo database, but if I was a real live user in this database, I would see my Benny changes and my move money and my opening my new accounts and my prep for the review meetings would all be listed here in chronological order, showing me what's past due, what's upcoming, and what's kind of future dated. And then the last tab we always have open is just a contact record, so that if somebody calls in, you have easy access to contact information, and we're not having to fumble around and duplicate tabs, and we have efficient, easy access to the most commonly used fields in Redtail at the tip of our fingers.
And how do you keep track of, or does the today page show past due activities?
Great question. I love this one. No. So every morning when I log in, this is a question we get a lot. So you've got your email, you've got your tasks, you've got your workflows. Like, how do you manage all of this? And one of the reasons we recommend that Redtail or your CRM be the hub of your practice is to eliminate some of these external systems that we're having to go to figure out, like, what the heck are we working on? So we want to eliminate the text messages, the direct messages, and the emails for action items. All action items need to be put into Redtail as a task and linked to a client's contact record. And so when we open up our 4 tabs in the morning, we got our calendar, we got our today page. This is only going to show action items with the start date of today. I mean, unless you're a rock star and you got through everything and you're really just taking on one day at a time, chances are you're going to have some past due activities. So when I open up my 4 tabs and I get to my today page, I click on this past due button. And here is a perfect example. I can see there's a couple of activities that I didn't get a chance to do this week. And so I'm going to click this top button here, and I have the ability to complete them in bulk, reassign them to Graham because I'm going to be out the rest of the week. I can reschedule them for Monday because I'm going to be out for the rest of the week and I'm perfectly capable of doing them. Or I can roll them over, which literally means it's going to change the start date to today. And now they're going to show up on my today page. So I would highly recommend to everybody on this call not to roll with past due activities. Everything needs to be rolled over to today. Appointments that have been completed, complete them on the day that they were done so that you can create a historical timeline in your client's contact record, but do not run with past due activities. That's a great way to lose sight of them and essentially drop balls.
And so can you roll over workflow tasks as well?
Not in the same way. So it's interesting. So a workflow, let me launch one. A workflow is just going to hang out here until you complete it. And so it's a really great placeholder, like a safety net to ensure that things don't get missed. Let's say a good example would be like a review meeting workflow. So a week before the review meeting, we want to prep. The day before the review meeting, we're going to meet with the advisory team and put our brains together. Day of, you're going to do this. The next day, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Let's say, so we write the templates, the workflow templates to be like, our ideal situation would be to prepare for this meeting a week in advance. We all know life doesn't always work out that way, right? And so if you do not complete that task a week in advance, it's going to sit here on your workflow page with the due date showing the date a week in advance of that meeting. And essentially it's just going to show that it's outdated. It's going to show that you need to work on this leading up to the meeting. It's not going to go anywhere until you complete it. And it's going to be your reminder essentially to work through that whenever you get the chance. It's not going to go anywhere, but you cannot roll it over. It's just going to hang out there until you get a chance to prep for the review meeting.
So kind of in that theme, Kimberly wants to know that she oversees a couple of employees and wants to know the best way of keeping track of all of her employees' tasks, both activity tasks and workflow tasks.
Okay, so again, this is a demo database. I'm going to show you. It's not going to be a great example, but you just follow along in your own database. So your today page that you access here on the top shows a list of your personal activities, that are assigned to me. If I want to see what the rest of my team is working on, I can click on activities up here. I can see past due activities. I can see upcoming activities. I can see today's activities. And I can change it to, Graham or Joe, whoever else on my team that I want to see what they're working on, their tasks. I can see their tasks for the month, next, whatever you're trying to look at here, you can expand the date range. If I want to look at my team's workflows, so as a reminder, if you want to look at your own personal workflows that are assigned to you, you access that from your today page in the top right corner here. But if you want to look at an overview of your entire firm's workflows, you click on this left button here, and it's going to show everybody in your firm or every workflow that has been launched for a client or a prospect or what have you, firm wide. And if you want to know, it's going to just kind of give you an overview of what's outstanding or what has been launched. But if you wanted to run a report and see like the specific tasks that are outstanding, by clicking on reports here on the left, I like this report, scroll all the way down, they're in alphabetical order. You'll get to the workflow report and you can see the workflow task report. And I apologize, this is just a demo database. But you'd be able to see by filtering it, all your workflows open this month that are assigned to the operations team, that are assigned to Graham, that are assigned to whoever on your team, and be able to sort through what's outstanding, what's upcoming. This just came up on our team. We have a team member who's going to be out for a week, and I wanted to see, oh geez, workflows have been launched that are assigned to him, and I need to reassign them to other people on my team. And so I came to this report and realized, holy smokes, we've got a bunch of tasks to the ops team that need to be reorganized. And I was able to do that very efficiently here. Great question.
Yeah. Have another question from Joan, wants to know, where's the best place to keep notes in an activity? Should it be in the description area or should it become a linked note? What's the difference in best practice?
Great question. And so let's just go back to my Benny change request here. So all client correspondence needs to be linked in Redtail. You hear Redtail say if it's not in Redtail, it didn't happen. And that's because from a compliance standpoint, any correspondence that you've had with the client needs to be logged under their contact record in your CRM. All client communication as it relates to an activity needs to be added as a linked note. Reason being, this linked note field maps over to Maggie's contact record under her notes section. Okay. This description box is intended to be used for internal dialogue. So this is where I say, hey, Graham, just met with Maggie. We need to update a Benny, and I'm going to communicate who the new Benny is, their date of birth, their social, their address, all here in the description box. This box, let me show you. It essentially does get saved to the client contact, but not in as clean of a format as this. You'd actually have to filter this by activity. And you just get all this mumbo jumbo in here with a bunch of, it really muddies up your notes section. And so it is our best practice to every client correspondence gets put in as a linked note. Internal dialogue is only intended to be put in that description box, and you only leave your presets for notes under the client's notes section, so you don't have to sift through more stuff than what you see there.
All right, this next was kind of a personal question to you, your preference.
Yeah.
What is something you would like to see improved inside of Redtail?
Ooh.
I'm trying to think of one for me too.
I'd like to see more robust automation so that if you do this in the database, this automatically happens. I would like to see recurring workflows. So you know how you can set a task to set up with like a recurring sequence. So within a task, you have the ability to make it repeat monthly, daily, weekly. I would love workflows to be able to do the same thing. So many of our workflows need to be done daily, quarterly, monthly. And right now we're using activities to remind us to launch workflows.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah. One of the other things that comes up a lot is being able to see contacts at a household level more efficiently than, clicking through to memberships. That's a really good question. I have to think about that, but off the cuff, those are the first couple.
Yeah, no, I think I actually agree with those. All right. So we're at 4:45. I want to just keep you aware of the time. I do.
Thank you.
Have another question from Kenneth. Wants to know about Wealthbox.
Sure.
Do you work with Wealthbox at all? And do you have any tips and tricks for it?
We do. That is a really great question. We do work with Wealthbox users. Given that today's really just a Redtail focused webinar, I'd be happy to answer any questions offline here, but for the sake of time, absolutely. And if we get enough Wealthbox users, I'd be happy to do a tips and tricks webinar on that too. Good question.
Yeah. So, kind of talked about a lot. Someone else wants to know, it seems like a lot. There's a lot to clean up. There's a lot to do. Where would you
Sure.
recommend you start? What's the first thing that you have to clean up and organize before you can do the rest of it?
Yeah, good question. So starting with organizing your contacts, I don't think that you can start to build out workflows or all the other fun kind of bells and whistles until you've organized your contacts. And so the way we work with firms is we start every engagement with a CRM assessment. And I'll show you just kind of an example. It's a lot of information, but we put together this really nice dashboard, which essentially is like an overview of your practice, highlighting the features or the things that you're using within your CRM, kind of show us some pieces that are being underutilized, and give us a good indication of how we can help and provide solutions to better obtain, maintain information and create systems to help you guys be a more efficient practice. And essentially, by doing the CRM assessment, we identify the level of organization and cleanup that's going to be required to get your database to our Simplicity Ops standard. So that's really where we start with our firms to get a good understanding of how they are or are not using their database, give them some actionable items to put into action to start getting them on the right foot with how to clean up data, how to structure data, what workflows to create. That's really where we get started.
How do you sign up for the CRM assessment?
Oh, good question. Let me go back to my PowerPoint slide here. If you have questions, if you're interested in getting started with a CRM assessment to give you kind of an overview of how we would be able to help you or how we would suggest you guys get started organizing this, you can email Courtney on our team, Courtney@simplicityops.com. You've got her contact information here, and she'll direct you to our website where we have a brief little questionnaire for you to fill out, just to get a better understanding about your firm, make sure we're going to be a good fit to help you. And then we can get started with CRM assessments. That second week of November, we'll have availability.
Do you have to commit to a full engagement in order to do the CRM assessment?
No, not at all. We'll get started with the CRM assessment, give you some feedback, kind of set the table for how we would tackle the project, give you a quote for the project. If you opt to hire us, we'll talk about a full engagement. Otherwise, you can take our recommendations as part of the CRM assessment. We put together a plan that essentially is hey, if I were you, if this was my firm, here's the things that I would do, and it's actionable items that you can take back to your firm and you can opt to build out yourself. So no, you do not need to commit to a full engagement. The CRM assessment should give you some good starter points of how to get going.
Awesome.
Very good.
All right. Well, I'm currently caught up on questions. If anyone has any last minute items, feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out to Courtney or myself. We're happy to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. If there's something that comes up after the fact or something that we didn't cover today, please feel free to reach out to us. And if you have ideas for future webinars, we like doing this. We like to collaborate with you guys, learn more about your practice. What are some of the pain points affecting the firms, and we can put together a topic for our next webinar.